Hi, I'm Donna Freitas, the author of the Big Questions book of Sex and Consent. So I talk about sex like all the time. I know, shocking. But I'm not shy or embarrassed about it. It's kind of a big part of my life and my job, and it's nothing to be ashamed of because sex, especially, is nothing to be ashamed of. And not being ashamed about sex is one of the big themes I talk about in this book because I want everyone, kids especially, to feel empowered and secure and honest when they talk and think about sex and consent. I've written lots of middle grade and YA novels, but this is my first nonfiction book for kids. I think I was getting ready to write the big questions for 20 years. I have this whole other life as a scholar, researcher, and college professor. And I try to follow some of the big questions my own students ask in their lives by doing national studies. A very big question they ask a lot is about sex, and especially lately, consent too. For the last 2 decades, I've been interviewing and talking to college students about these aspects of their lives. One of the things I hear a lot is how college students wish they could go back and talk to their younger selves to give them advice and say what they wish they had known about sex back then. And one of the many things I've learned from these conversations is how I would expand sex and consent education to try to include the kinds of things I know we're leaving out and how we teach kids and don't about sex and consent. That's how the Big Questions book came to be. I want to talk a bit about what my book is not and why. The Big Questions book of Sex and Consent is not a how-to about sex. Often the only kind of sex education we get involves do's and don'ts, and mostly don'ts, plus the technicalities of sex. The same goes for consent. We teach people yes and no, and hope they'll mostly say no. We tell kids how things work. This is what you need to prevent disease, and by the way, make sure you get that yes. These are important things, but so much of what we teach kids is fear and danger based. But the purpose of this book is to empower kids to become critical thinkers about sex and consent and all that goes with them. I believe we need to become comfortable asking the big questions about sex and consent. Questions like, what is the meaning of sex in our lives? Why does sex matter anyway? What does it mean to practice sexual ethics? The kinds of things that we do not have easy answers to. I don't want anyone to be afraid of this part of who they are. It is in asking big, tough questions that we become empowered in relation to the aspects of our lives and humanity that don't have easy answers. Most of all, I want kids to become empowered, sexually self-possessed people for whom care and consideration of their partners is simply a given. People for whom concern about consent is built right in.